8:42 a.m. A black man steps into a small-town courtroom, 3 minutes late. The judge slams a $750 fine. He raises a gold badge, and the room stops breathing. If you love twist-packed courtroom stories, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. Now let's begin. The clock above the courthouse doors blinked 8:42 a.m. as Malik Carter slid his sedan into the last open space on the far edge of the Greenville, South Carolina municipal lot. Sunlight draped long lines across the asphalt, bright and misleading, as if the day were simple. It wasn't. Malik hated being late. His world ran on precision. Filings down to the minute, evidence labeled to the letter, timelines that clicked together like watch gears. He lived by order not because it was easy, but because chaos was his usual adversary. Human trafficking rings, corruption that hid behind expensive smiles, systems that bent under pressure. Today was supposed to be routine. A property tax miscalculation on the house his grandmother had left him. Nothing glamorous, just a mistake that cost people like his grandmother money they couldn't spare. Malik had spent nights between federal filings, sifting through assessments, municipal notices, and the city's valuation formula, circling the same conclusion again and again. The 30% jump was wrong. The house wasn't just square footage. It was the smell of collard greens in a winter kitchen, the stern look his grandmother gave him when he tried to skip church, the back porch where she taught him to tell the truth even when truth bites. He straightened his navy suit, smoothed a crisp white shirt, and checked his phone. A message from Tara Miles, his assistant at the U.S. Attorney's Office. FYI, Judge Barrett Crane is tough on late arrivals. Be careful. Malik exhaled. He'd been late for a reason. At 7:51 a.m., a paralegal flagged a last-minute defense motion in an active human trafficking case, a technical ambush meant to stall a hearing. He reviewed, annotated, and approved a response in under 20 minutes. Then he drove, steady, silent, calculating, and ended up 3 minutes past the start. He told himself it would be fine. Municipal courts were not federal courts, but fairness still wore the same face, or it should have. Inside, the Greenville Municipal Court wore its history plainly. Beige walls polished by decades of indifference, scuffed benches that had held more fear than comfort, paper, coffee, and the faint metallic scent of a copier running too hot. People clutched files with two hands, as if documents could shield them. Parking fines, code violations, disputes that felt small until they swallowed a paycheck. Malik checked a placard. Room 204, Judge Barrett Crane. He adjusted his tie and slipped into the back row. The judge entered with a stride that suggested the building existed to reflect him. Judge Crane was tall and pale, with hair that had stubbornly clung to silver in straight, ordered rows. His eyes skimmed faces like items on a receipt. No smile, no warmth, just the hum of authority. All rise, the bailiff announced. The room stood, then settled. Case after case moved with conveyor belt efficiency. Malik noticed small things. A middle-aged man in a gray blazer slipped into his seat after the docket had begun. No one said a word. A young woman in a hoodie snuck into the second row, late by any clock that counted. No reprimand, no fine. The judge's gaze skimmed past them like nothing had happened. At 9:15 a.m., the clerk called Carter Malik. Malik rose, folder in hand, tabbed exhibits, photos, a one-page timeline with the old assessment values. He stepped to the podium, posture even, tempo controlled. "You're late, Mr. Carter." Judge Crane snapped before Malik could speak. The words were smooth and sharp, like glass under a glove. "Do you believe the court's time is less valuable than yours?" Malik lifted his palms in a gesture that offered respect without surrender. "Your Honor, I apologize. A federal matter required immediate review." "Excuses don't excuse," the judge said, voice cold. "This court runs on order. When you disrupt it, you face consequences." $750. It dropped like a manhole cover. A few people stirred. Someone sucked air. $750 for 3 minutes? In a municipal court that routinely waived half, that for people who forgot to move their trash bin back from the curb? "Your Honor," Malik said, keeping his voice steady, careful. "May I be heard?" "You may pay," the judge answered, bringing his gavel down in a clean, theatrical tap. Malik's jaw tightened, but his face remained still, an old habit, learned in rooms where even the shape of a flinch could be misread. He glanced at the gray blazer man, who'd drifted in late. No fine. The woman in the hoodie. No reprimand. The pattern did not whisper, it announced. "Proceed with your matter," the judge said, as if granting charity. Malik set the folder on the podium and clicked open his outline. "The city improperly increased my grandmother's property assessment by 30% without notice and contrary to published methodology. Exhibit A shows 5 years of consistent valuation. Exhibit B shows the jump with no qualifying improvement, and Exhibit C is the city's own formula." The judge leaned back, bored. "I'll review it in due time. But tardiness is discourtesy, federal job or not. We expect better." "I understand the importance of rules," Malik said. "I also understand the importance of applying them equally." Silence changed temperature. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Are you questioning this court's integrity, Mr. Carter?" "I'm asking whether the same standard applied to everyone who entered late this morning," Malik replied, even tone, hands resting on the podium's edge. "Because I observed otherwise." The gavel cracked the air. "Your fine stands. Watch yourself." Malik inclined his head once, like a chess player who advances a pawn knowing what that move will summon. He returned to his seat and began writing. Times, faces, who entered when, what happened next, who was warned, who wasn't, who looked relieved, who looked embarrassed. Each line was a wire in a fence he was building. Across from him, a law student at the end of the row, Sophia Nguyen, by the name pinned to her satchel, scribbled like someone trying to keep up with the storm. The docket churned on, but the room had changed. People watched Malik without turning their heads. The clerk, a woman with careful posture and a wedding band she spun when nervous, flinched every time the judge snapped at a defendant. The bailiff, stocky and straight-backed, stared just above Malik's shoulder. He'd been here long enough to know when a moment wasn't routine. When the morning session ended, the room spilled into the hallway, a soft flood of paper and murmurs. Malik did not leave. He sat, checked his notes, and felt something he rarely allowed himself in court: anger. Not the hot, careless kind. The cold, correct kind that sharpened the mind. He reached into his briefcase and touched the leather badge wallet, the gold eagle catching the light, like a quiet threat. He wasn't here as Assistant United States Attorney on the docket, but he was that everywhere he stood. And he was also the boy his grandmother raised, taught to stand up without shouting. The judge was sorting papers on the bench when Malik approached the podium again. The clerk's typing slowed. The bailiff, name tag Harold Vance, shifted his weight and did not stop Malik. "Mr. Carter," Judge Crane said without looking up, "court is adjourned. You may schedule further matters with the clerk." "With respect, Your Honor," Malik answered, setting a small black wallet on the edge of the podium and flipping it open so the gold shone plainly. "I should properly introduce myself. Malik D. Carter, Assistant United States Attorney, Northern District of South Carolina. 10 years with DOJ. Primary focus: human trafficking, corruption, and civil rights enforcement." The judge's hand stopped. The muscles along his jaw made a brief, involuntary move. From the back, someone whispered, then swallowed it. The clerk's fingers hovered above keys. The bailiff's eyes clicked to the badge, then to the judge. "I was late because a trafficking case required an emergency response," Malik said, calm as stone. "And while I accept responsibility for minutes on a clock, what I cannot accept is a standard that shifts with the skin of the person standing at this podium. I saw who came in late this morning. I saw who you ignored. I saw who you fined. If you believe you've witnessed misconduct," the judge said, face carefully expressionless, "you may file a complaint with the proper body." "I've already begun documenting," Malik replied, lifting his notebook. "Not for me. For everyone who sat in this room and learned a lesson they should never have to learn." The sentence hovered between them, gathering weight. Then Malik closed the badge wallet with a soft, absolute sound. "Thank you for your time, Your Honor." He left without looking back. The email to his office left his draft folder at 12:06 p.m. It was clinical in tone, relentless in detail, times listed to the minute, descriptions that were factual without heat, comparisons that left no wiggle room. He attached a request for the court's morning log, the late entry sign-in, and fine records for the past 5 years. He CC'd Leah Donovan, his supervisor, a veteran prosecutor who'd won cases through patience and an instinct for when a quiet thing was actually loud. By 8:40 the next morning, Leah called. "Malik, I read your report. If this is representative, we aren't looking at one bad day. We're looking at a pattern." "That's my read," Malik said. "I'm not the story. The numbers are." "I'm contacting the Judicial Review Commission," Leah replied. "Collect everything. Public records, transcripts, docket sheets. If there's smoke, we'll find the fire that made it." He began at his desk, and then he didn't sit much again. He filed public records requests with the endurance of a distance runner. He built a spreadsheet, dates, defendants, infractions, race where recorded, fines, warnings, and judge initials. The numbers started arranging themselves into a shape. Fine spiked for black defendants under Crane. Warnings and continuances ballooned for white defendants under similar facts. Even payment plans, the grace that lets people eat and still obey the law, skewed hard. And the stories came. Quietly at first. An email from a public defender who had stopped asking for mercy in Crane's courtroom because mercy was for certain people. A letter folded 3 times from a woman who'd paid a $500 fine for a code violation that the city later admitted it had misposted. A voicemail from a man who just wanted someone to say he hadn't imagined it. Then the unexpected. The clerk from that morning, Evelyn Park, asked to meet. She arrived with a small, lined notebook, edges softened by years. "I started writing things down," she said, voice low. "Not because I planned to use it, because I needed to stay sane. Dates, names, what was said. When it didn't sit right, it went in here. I didn't think anyone would believe me. I didn't think I could do anything." Malik read while she watched. The entries were spare and lethal. May 7th, late white contractor, no fine. Late black nurse, $250, tears. Judge said nurses should know time. September 19th, black teen asked to speak. Judge interrupted 3x. White college kid spoke for 6 minutes about pressure. January 3rd, 2 defendants with same code violation. White warning. Black, $300, no plan allowed. Harold Vance, the bailiff, reached out next. They met in a diner that still served coffee in heavy white mugs. Harold's voice had the steady cadence of a man who had learned to speak carefully in rooms with power. 15 years on that floor, he said. You see a lot. You tell yourself not to see patterns, because what can you do about them? But it's there. Who gets corrected? Who gets humiliated? Who gets grace? It's there. When the Judicial Review Commission opened a formal inquiry, it moved faster than rumors. Investigators pulled 5 years of dockets. They asked for transcripts, for clerk emails, for bench notes. They interviewed staff, defense attorneys, minor clerks who'd never been asked anything but, "Can you make copies?" They spoke to defendants who had nothing to gain, nothing to prove, who came anyway because a stranger's badge had convinced them they weren't crazy. And then a spark leapt into tinder. Sophia Nguyen, the law student from the back row, wrote a measured, precise thread about what she'd witnessed. No adjectives where facts would do. No names without corroboration. It spread. People whose hands still shook when they spoke about court put their shaking hands on keyboards. Local press picked it up. Then state. Then the kind of national outlets that make small rooms feel suddenly crowded. In the second week, Leah called again. Preliminary analysis is ugly. Black defendants fined at 3 times the rate of white defendants for comparable infractions. Late arrivals, reprimands and fines primarily for black litigants. Payment plans denied to black defendants at a rate we cannot justify against policy. What's Crane's response? Malik asked. Publicly, regret for any misunderstandings. Privately, he's been in closed-door meetings with oversight. He knows the board isn't here for a scolding. Greenville's courthouse steps filled with signs that said justice should be blind, End bias now. Courts are for everyone. Malik avoided cameras. He wasn't a symbol. He was a witness with a spreadsheet. But he read the signs and felt the way his grandmother's house felt, like a place meant to be safe. Inside the building, Evelyn Parks sat for a recorded interview. When asked why she hadn't come forward earlier, she stared at her hands. "Because I love my job," she said finally. "Because I thought I could do more good staying than leaving. Because I was afraid." The investigator nodded like someone who had heard that sentence too often. Harold Vance gave a sworn statement. He did not soften his words to make friends he didn't respect. "I've watched it for years," he said. Respect and punishment handed out like favors, and some faces never seemed to fit the list. Week 3. The numbers stopped being numbers and became policy recommendations. Mandatory bias training for judges and clerks. Randomized audits of fines and sentencing outcomes. Transparent payment plan criteria. A community oversight panel that included people who'd actually sat on those benches with shaking hands and too many bills. Judge Barrett Crane issued a statement about legacy expectations and the burden of interpretation. It read like a man trying to explain rain to people who were soaked. By the end of a month that felt like a year, the preliminary report landed like a gavel of its own. The findings were not subtle. They were a map of how power had drifted off-center in Courtroom 204. The Judicial Review Commission recommended immediate intervention, a public hearing, and, pending the hearing, suspension. The next morning, Crane resigned. The statement was brief and careful. "In the best interest of the court and community, I will step aside." It did not say why. It did not apologize. It did not have to. The data had already spoken. Malik did not celebrate. He went back to work. The trafficking case that had made him late moved forward. A girl who had once signed school papers with a flower instead of her name testified with a voice that didn't shake as much as she feared. Malik sat with her before court and told her the thing his grandmother had told him. "We go in telling the truth. We come out the same. Nobody gets to take that from us." The Greenville courthouse began to change in ways both cosmetic and core. The beige walls were painted a kinder color, but more importantly, signs appeared in multiple languages explaining rights, payment plans, and where to find legal aid. A small plaque went up near the door. "Equal justice belongs to everyone." People stopped and touched it like a promise they wanted to feel. A new judge took the bench, a woman with a reputation for listening before deciding. Clerks attended training run by people who understood that bias is not a feeling you confess. It's a system you repair. Random audits began. Payment plans were approved when policy said they should be. The first month's data showed fines normalizing across racial lines. The second month improved again. Malik kept a $750 receipt framed on his office wall. Not as a trophy. He didn't need one, but as a reminder. Beneath it, a photograph of 6 law students who started a civil rights clinic after Sophia's thread. They asked Malik to guest lecture. He said yes, then stayed after to answer questions from students who wanted to fight fair in a world that rarely did. At one workshop, a student asked, "What's the single most important thing we can do to make courts fairer?" Malik thought about Evelyn's notebook, Harold's steady voice, Sophia's thread, the old men who'd come back to stand on the steps with signs for their grandchildren, the woman who sent a letter from 2 states away that began, "I thought it was just me." He said, "Listen, write it down, act, in that order, and when it gets hard, do it again." Not everyone loved the reforms. Some muttered about authority undermined. Others warned about overcorrection. But data didn't take offense. It just kept showing what it showed, and what it showed was progress. Months later, Malik walked back into room 204 by invitation, not summons. He was there to speak at the launch of a judicial ethics and equity initiative, a mouthful of a name that meant, "We're going to check ourselves now." The room was full, judges, clerks, public defenders, citizens who had sat where defendants sit. Evelyn Parks stood near the back, hands loose at her sides. Harold Vance nodded from the aisle. Sophia sat in the front row with a notebook and a little, proud smile. Malik took the podium and looked at the bench where a man once made the room colder. He pictured the gold badge in his hand that day and his grandmother's small kitchen, where she explained justice, with a wooden spoon in one hand and a Bible in the other. He did not clear his throat. He did not check his phone. He just spoke. Courts don't belong to judges. They don't belong to prosecutors. They don't belong to clerks or cops. They belong to the people. All of them. And that means fairness isn't a favor we hand out. It's a standard we protect. Some days that protection is quiet. Some days it's loud. The morning I was fined for being late, it felt small. It wasn't. It was a thread connected to a net. We pulled the thread, and we found the net. Then we started cutting. He let the silence rest before he finished. If you see something that doesn't feel like justice, write it down. Say it out loud. Say it here. That's how we keep this room honest. The applause was not explosive, it was long. People didn't clap for him. They clapped for the room, for what it might become. Afterward, an elderly man approached, hat in his hands. "Been coming here 40 years, he said. "Didn't think I'd live to see somebody stop the room and make it listen. Thank you." Malik shook his hand. "You did that," he said. "You kept coming." Later, alone in his car, Malik opened his grandmother's address and his photos. The porch with its chipping paint, the steps that needed fixing, the door that always stuck in summer. He'd won the tax case in the least dramatic way possible, with evidence, policy, and patience. The refund check had arrived quietly. He used part of it to fix the steps. He left the door alone. Some things he wanted to stick, to remind you to push a little when you wanted to quit. He started the engine and watched the courthouse in his rearview mirror, a building that had learned to look at itself. And he felt that old, correct anger cool into something better, resolve. Justice wasn't a gavel. It was a practice. And now, in Greenville, it was finally being practiced.